Strange sounds were coming from my grandfather's room every day. One night, I peeked out the window and lost consciousness. My sister-in-law was lying on my grandfather's bed, and my grandfather was using his 9-inch. We lived in a big city like Lahore. We had a big business, and my husband, father-in-law, and brother-in-law all managed their own businesses. My mother-in-law, I, and my sister-in-law would do the housework together, and after finishing, we would chat for a while, and then, if we had time, we would rest a little. The three of us would eat lunch together, while at night we would wait for our husbands to come, and in the evening, when the three of them returned, we would first drink evening tea together, and then have dinner together. Our life was filled with immense love and affection. We didn't feel like we were in-laws. We felt like it was our parents' house. I thought that our life could be as beautiful as it could be. There was another house right next to our house. My room window opened into their yard, and there was a window in a room right in front of my window. If they were inside, I could see them. The distance between my room and theirs wasn't that great. If someone spoke loudly, I could hear them clearly. These were our neighbors. In their house lived a mother-in-law, father-in-law, and daughter-in-law. There was also an elderly man who everyone called Dadaji. We also called him Dadaji. Being neighbors, we also had to come and go to their house a lot, and this room with the window in front was also Dadaji's. Dadaji was not like ordinary grandfathers. He was an educated grandfather, and there was a shelf of books in his room. He was always seen sitting on his rocking chair, wearing pink glasses with round lenses on his nose, turning the pages of a book. I usually saw him reading books from the window. The curtains of his window were always drawn, so I could clearly see the heat in his room. It often happened that during the rainy season, when I drew the curtains, I would see my grandfather sitting on his rocking chair with a cup of hot tea in front of him, eating hot pakodas or biscuits, but his book was never separated from him. I always liked such elders who, at that age, remain engrossed in their own lives without bothering anyone, live in books, and remain clean. I was attached to his personality. He was a mature elder, not at all like ordinary elders who return to childhood with advancing age, whose minds become like those of a child, and whose tongues keep moving. He was different from all those who make children suffer. He was a serious and sober person. I liked seeing him. I had visited his house many times. He was in his room even then. I had talked to him a couple of times. He was a very well-mannered elder, and I liked talking to him. And now, for a few days, I was not feeling well in my grandfather's room. Every night, strange sounds came from his room. Sometimes it seemed like he was shouting and cursing at someone. Sometimes it seemed like he was scared and shaking. His own screams were coming out. Sometimes it seemed like he was crying loudly. It had been almost a week since this incident. I was very worried. I did not understand what was happening. I had not mentioned this to anyone at home, and I could not find time to go out of my busy life to ask him how he was doing. I could not understand how a kind, serious, and moral person like my grandfather could behave like this. Why did he do this? Maybe he was not feeling well, or maybe there was a fight at home, but fights do not last that long. I would ask myself questions while thinking about him and answer them myself. Then she would get busy in her own life, and it is true that man has always been selfish. He has always been in the forefront of checking the affairs of others and watching the spectacle of others. The rest of the time, he just lives peacefully in his own life. We do not feel anyone's pain affecting us. We remain engrossed in our own lives, unaware of everything. For a while, we shake our heads in sorrow at the pain of a person and join hands to grieve. Then we become engrossed in our own life and do not even bother to think about that person's pain again and ask them how they are. I also had the same calculation. At one time, I would think about them and then get lost in my own life. I could not even go and check on them. Many days had passed like this. Every night I would hear voices and think, I will go tomorrow and ask about them. But every day, I could not get out of my busy schedule and go. One day I heard a lot of noise. I woke up from my sleep. I found my husband sleeping in a very deep sleep. He was sleeping oblivious to everything. I slowly got up from my seat and walked towards the window. I pulled back the curtains and looked outside with searching eyes. The entire lawn outside was plunged into silence. My gaze darted to the courtyard in front. There were 3 chairs and a table in the courtyard, which were shining in the moonlight. Plants were blooming in the lawn, and various types of flowers of beautiful colors were growing, which I could see in the moonlight. Along with the flowers, various types of small and large plants were also growing, which stood tall and proud. My gaze immediately went from the courtyard to the window opening into Grandpa's room. The scene there was strange. My grip on the window curtain tightened. That whole scene was enough to shake my heart. I could not even imagine that a sober, well-mannered, and serious person like Grandpa could do such things. I saved myself from falling and grabbed the window tightly. The scene in front was not visible properly, but what was visible was enough to make me feel guilty. In the milky light of the night light bulb in front of me, I could see my grandfather clearly. I could not see the rest of his movements, but what I could see clearly, I had seen. In my grandfather's room, his grandson's wife was lying on his bed, and my grandfather was standing on the side, screaming, his hand raised. I did not understand what was happening, but anyway, my condition had worsened. Seeing all this, what was his daughter-in-law doing at that time? That was all I was thinking in his room. I pulled back the window curtains further and started looking forward to examine further. My heart was pounding. There were drops of sweat on my forehead, and I was also very scared that what was happening was happening. I had already turned off the light bulb. Then, as if the light in my room had gone out, as if he had noticed me, Grandpa immediately looked at me. I thought he was looking at me. Maybe he was looking at the window, or maybe he was looking at something else. But I felt that Grandpa was looking at me. My heart started beating faster. And then, after a while, I saw his grandson's wife leaving Grandpa's room. I saw that she was in a hurry. She was going somewhere in a hurry. I don't know where she went. She disappeared from Grandpa's room. I quickly pulled down the curtains and quickly went to my bed and fell asleep. I couldn't understand what was happening. I came to my bed and, being afraid, picked up the blanket and covered myself. My senses were still sharp. Many thoughts were dominating my mind. I couldn't understand what all this was. What was happening? Why had she gone to Grandpa's room? I called her Bobby, and what was Bobby doing in Grandpa's room at that time? And what was Grandpa doing? I didn't understand. It was already 2 in the morning, and I couldn't understand what could be happening at that time. Well, I fell asleep on my bed. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating very badly. It felt like it was going to burst into my throat or burst out of my chest. I could hardly control myself. Sleep had disappeared from my eyes, but I still covered myself with a blanket. I fell asleep close to my husband. I don't know when I woke up, but when I woke up in the morning, my husband and my father-in-law, including my brother-in-law, had gone to the office, and everyone had had breakfast. My breakfast had been served. I came quickly and had breakfast. The night's incident was still on my mind. I had breakfast in silence. I had not talked to anyone at home about this. I had breakfast and got up in silence. After that, I did all the housework carelessly. After that, I had prepared that I was going to ask about Grandpa's health. But at the right time, I remembered the work at home, and I stopped at home again. When after a long time I finished, I left the house. I told the house that I was going to the neighbor's house. I had some work to do. After that, I was at the gate of Grandpa's house about 10 minutes later. Then I knocked on the door. There was no answer. After that, I rang the bell. Still there was no answer. I rang the door again, and now the same daughter-in-law and sister-in-law appeared at the door. Today, Bobby's condition was getting very bad. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her face and complexion had turned pale. She did not look like she used to. She was wearing very dirty clothes as if she was working, but she looked sick for centuries. I greeted her. She responded to my greeting with a nod of her head, and then stepped aside to let me in. Today, no one welcomed me at her house as before. Now everyone's faces seemed downcast. Now the door to Grandpa's room was locked. Maybe Grandpa was resting inside on his rocking chair or reading a book. I did not know. Yes, of course, I had spoken to Bobby. Bobby was quiet today. Then I inquired about the situation at home. Bobby said, "Thank God. Everything is fine and I am fine too. I have just been feeling a little unwell for the past few days, which is why my condition is getting a little worse." I did not believe Bobby's words, but I smiled and said, "I am fine." I pretended to believe what he said, but today his house looked deserted, as if no one had lived in it for centuries, as if there had been a shadow of silence in it for centuries. Then I wanted to talk about Grandpa. I asked about Grandpa's health. After listening to Grandpa, her condition seemed very bad. It seemed as if she was scared. I was even more worried about what she had said. But today, my sister-in-law was not talking to me like she used to, so I decided to leave soon. Her mother-in-law met me, greeted me, and left again. Her condition was also a bit strange. In fact, she was behaving a bit strangely. I did not understand what was going on in her house. Well, I quickly asked for permission to leave. My sister-in-law's behavior made me feel as if she had come to life, as if she was very happy with my departure. She told me, "Yes, no problem. Come on, no problem. Come back." I smiled and went back quietly. I was very worried after coming here. The incident of the night was even more worrying, and today when I saw my sister-in-law and her family with this behavior, I did not understand. My worry increased even more. My heart was constantly checking on her condition. I wanted to know what she was saying, and I really wanted to help her with all my heart. But no one there had made me their confidant. I could not understand what was going on between my sister-in-law and her grandfather. Strange thoughts were coming to my mind. I was also obsessed with the character of both of them, and grandfather's personality was starting to seem very strange to me. Now I was starting to feel a kind of hatred for grandfather. I felt that he was forcibly marrying his grandson's wife. I felt very bad and I wanted my sister-in-law to tell me the truth, but my sister-in-law had completely hidden the truth from me. Now I did not know what to do. I was wandering around the house, and then my mother-in-law came in and seeing me worried, she said, "Son, what has happened? Why are you so worried? I have been watching you since morning. You have been quiet and even quieter after the neighbors returned from their house. What is it that is worrying you?" She was like my mother-in-law. She was not like traditional mothers-in-law. She knew our problems and gave us very good advice. Behind her, I saw my sister-in-law coming, but I did not feel any fear because we all knew each other's things and talked to each other without fear or anxiety. So I told my mother-in-law the whole thing. My mother-in-law remained completely silent. Then I asked again, "Mother, what has happened? Now tell me what the problem is and what should we do? I think my sister-in-law is in danger." Mom smiled and looked at me silently, and then she started talking. Every word she said made my hair stand on end. I couldn't believe if all this was actually real or if I was dreaming. Mom started talking. My friends and I were listening very carefully. Every word was making my body feel electric. I couldn't believe that all this could be real. The mother told that the son of the couple, that is, the husband of the sister-in-law, is an army officer, and he lives there. It has been a long time, and he has neither returned nor made any calls. Now his daughter-in-law is talking to someone else. When Dada came to know about this, she started beating him up a lot. She used to give sleeping pills mixed with milk to her mother-in-law and grandfather at night, and made them dance at night. But grandfather did not drink that milk for a few days. Dada had already suspected her. Dada followed her and found out all her deeds. After that, she was about to kill Dada. Dada wanted to inform his daughter-in-law and son about this, but she started threatening Dada with her life. But one day, she went to Dada's room with milk, so Dada took the glass of milk from her and smashed it on the ground and started shouting. Due to her shouting, his daughter-in-law and son also entered his room. Grandfather came and started talking to him about his sister-in-law and started telling him the truth about it. But he didn't believe it at all. He felt that grandfather was losing his mental balance with age. After a few days, grandfather had poured the medicine mixed in the glass of his daughter-in-law and son, and had kept the glasses of milk safe and sound, avoiding the eyes of his sister-in-law. His sister-in-law had picked up the glass and given it to her father-in-law. That day, they drank the milk and didn't sleep because they hadn't taken the sleeping medicine today. Both of them were awake. When she came to grandfather's room, they were both awake. That day, too, Grandpa had made a lot of noise, but they both didn't come out because Grandpa had already told them that when I yelled at him, you guys should act like you didn't come out, so he wouldn't suspect that you guys were awake. That very night, I saw Grandpa and Pobby in their room. That day, Grandpa had pushed her down on the bed and was hitting her with his hand. But he did not hit her. He just raised his hand, after which the sister-in-law ran away from the room crying. And that night, the grandfather went to her room with his daughter-in-law and son. He revealed his true identity to everyone. But he was waiting for his daughter to come. For a few days now, his son was going to come. Today, he had informed me. My hair stood up. My sister-in-law could do this because the sister-in-law was a very noble person. She had very good morals and a very good character. I could not believe that the sister-in-law could do this. But I was surprised. How did my mother know about this? Then I asked her in fear, "How did you know about this?" So my mother told me that my grandfather is a very close friend of our father-in-law, and he had mentioned it to him. With his help, he had also contacted his grandson today. Now they were all waiting for the grandson to come. Now I do not know what he does after he comes. I had heard that the devil, even the best of people, can do very bad things when they are seduced, and I could not believe it. But today I was completely convinced how good my sister-in-law was, but how many wrong steps she was ready to take after being seduced by the devil, and what a foolish decision she had made. But today, I started to feel close to my grandfather again. Today, I started to see my grandfather in my grandfather. I could not help but feel sorry for my grandfather. How hard that poor man had been able to bring his truth to everyone. Then, after 2 or 3 days, his grandson was present with him, and now it was his turn to lift the veil of his wife in front of him, which Dadaji had lifted again. But this time, Dadaji was not alone. This time, his daughter-in-law and son were also with him. She was very good. But this act of hers was very unpleasant to everyone. And honor and pride are also something so. Keeping honor and pride in mind, they thought that she could not stay in this house now, so they also did this now. He was sure that he would never tolerate her presence in this house again. Otherwise, he would face a lot of shame tomorrow. So he had to tell his grandson the truth about his wife. So the 3 of them wanted to tell him in turn, but he became very angry. He said, "You people should be ashamed. She serves you all in my absence to the point that she has forgotten herself, and you people are making such baseless accusations against her." He was not believing in any way. They kept convincing the 3 of them again and again, but he could not believe it in any way. He had too much faith in his wife. When for a long time after the arrival of Dadaji's grandson, the sister-in-law did not meet the boy with whom she had celebrated the wedding earlier, the boy lost his temper. One day, he came to their house and climbed the wall to their window. Her husband had woken up. He saw that he was trying to come into their room. He slowly got up from his seat and went out. He took a step forward and slowly grabbed him from behind and asked him that the thief had come to steal. But he said, "No, I did not come to steal. I came to meet your wife. She has not been meeting me for many days. I was missing him a lot. And so now this grandson also came to know the truth about his wife. He had divorced his wife at that very moment. His wife kept crying, telling him that it was not his fault. But when it was his own fault, how could he forgive her fault? And polytheism is disliked by God. So how could he, as a human being like him, he was very broken. We kept getting information about his house from my father-in-law, and we were very sorry we could not fix the affairs of his house, even if we wanted to. His grandson left after a few days, and we heard that the boy who was caught with his wife had also left her. And now she was suffering a lot of pain after some time. Grandfather took his grandson back. He called and married him to a good girl. That girl was much better than the first sister-in-law. She was a good person in character and morals, and her character was never bad and could never be. She was full of faith, and now she was happy in her life, just as we are. I pray that Allah Almighty grants everyone obedient companions and gives them the ability to live together in harmony and keeps us away from the deception of the devils so that we do not bring our character down. Indeed, this falling from character is not acceptable to anyone, not even to the person for whom he had fallen below his standards with his character. And a living example of this was the sister-in-law before us.